Hey everyone, and welcome back to TalkTensors. Today we're diving into Timer, a paper that's really trying to push the boundaries of how LLMs understand, well, time.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how this research is trying to equip AI with that deeper understanding of time, like we humans have.
Right, like Timer focuses specifically on medical records, where like understanding the sequence of events, that is absolutely crucial. Imagine a doctor trying to, diagnose a patient, they have a chronic condition, medications, test results, symptoms, they're all spread out over years.
It's almost like trying to understand a story, but like all the chapters are all jumbled up. You need that temporal understanding to really make sense of it all.
Absolutely, and that's precisely the problem that Timer is tackling. And they're doing it with two big innovations. First, they created TimerBench, which is a new way to actually evaluate how well LLMs can reason about time in this medical context. It's like a stress test, pushing these AI models to show that they can actually connect the dots across a patient's entire history.
Yeah, the genius of TimerBench really lies in its design. It uses these very carefully crafted prompts. They force the LLMs to synthesize information from different points in that patient timeline, really, really challenging their ability to connect those events and understand that flow of medical information.
And then the second innovation, which is Timer-Instruct, which is their method for actually training LLMs to get better at this temporal reasoning. It's like giving them a crash course in how to understand the chronology of a patient's medical history.
And Timer-Instruct is quite innovative. Instead of relying on, humans to annotate everything, which is very time-consuming and expensive, they actually developed a method that uses other LLMs to actually generate the training data.
Wait, so they used AI to train AI. That's incredible. How does that even work?
It's quite meta, isn't it? They essentially use LLMs to create synthetic medical records. And then from those records, they can generate all of these instruction response pairs based on those records, right? Which highlight those temporal relationships. So you can force that LLM being trained to pay attention to that sequence of events.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
They basically built a time machine by immersing the AI in a world where time is the most critical factor.
Exactly.
But before we go too deep into Timer-Instruct, I think it's helpful to take a step back and look at the research landscape that kind of led up to this paper. Like, what was the state of the art before Timer came along?
Yeah, absolutely. I think context is key. If we look back, we can see that traditional medical AI models, they often really struggled with this concept of time. They were great at analyzing, snapshots of information, like a single lab report, but piecing together a patient's entire history, that was a whole different ballgame.
Right. It was like having a doctor who only reads the last page of the patient's chart.
Precisely.
And then they're like, okay, well, this is what's going on. But what happened before that led to this point?
Existing models, they often fell prey to what we call recency bias. They would focus heavily on the most recent events, overlooking those potentially vital clues from further back in the patient's timeline. And even human doctors, right? We can fall into this trap sometimes. So it's not surprising that AI models did too.
So it sounds like Timer is really addressing a very real gap in medical AI research. They're pushing these models to think beyond that snapshot and embrace the complexities of time.
That's exactly right. And that's where the importance of TimerBench really shines. They recognize that previous benchmarks for evaluating medical AI, they often didn't properly test this crucial ability to reason about time.
It was like testing a chef's skills, but you only have them make salads. Sure, they might be great at chopping lettuce, but can they roast a chicken? Can they create this, complex multi-course meal?
That's a great analogy. TimerBench is designed to test those higher level skills, those that require an understanding of not just the ingredients, but the timing, the sequencing that goes into creating a truly masterful dish, or in this case, a truly insightful medical diagnosis. And that's really where Timer-Instruct comes in. They needed a way to train these AI models to see the whole picture, the entire timeline of a patient's health.
Right, and this is where things get really interesting to me. It's like they use AI to generate the training data itself.
Exactly. Instead of relying on human experts to annotate all of these medical records, which would be, incredibly time-consuming and expensive, they used LLMs to create synthetic medical records. And from those records, you can generate just a huge amount of training data that highlights all those crucial temporal relationships.
It's like they built a medical school for AI, but instead of having human professors, you have AI instructors who are generating the lessons and the case studies.
That's a great way to visualize it. And what's even more intriguing is they discovered this peculiar phenomenon during this data generation process. They call it the lost in the middle effect.
Lost in the middle. What does that even mean?
So they found that the LLMs that were generating this data, they tended to focus heavily on events at the beginning and end of a patient's timeline, while giving less attention to events that happened in the middle.
It's almost like the AI is getting distracted by the most recent stuff, and then the oldest stuff, and everything in between is just like a little blurry.
That's a great way to put it. And this was a significant concern, of course, because those critical medical events, they can happen at any point in a patient's history.
So how do they address this lost in the middle problem? Did they go back and retrain those LLMs that were generating the data, or?
So they ingeniously designed different training data sets. Each of them had a distinct temporal distribution. So one that emphasized recent events, another that focused on the beginning and end of that timeline, and then finally one with a more uniform distribution. So the events were kind of evenly spread out across the timeline.
So they basically created different teaching styles to see which one worked best. It's like comparing a chronological textbook to a book that jumps around in time.
Precisely. And their findings were quite revealing. The models trained with the uniformly distributed data, the one covering that whole timeline, they performed significantly better when it came to that temporal reasoning.
So it really was like teaching the AI to see the whole forest, not just the trees on the edge.
Exactly. And the results of these experiments were really quite impressive. They tested these timer-trained models on their own benchmark. So TimerBench, as well as an existing benchmark called Metaline, which uses real human annotated medical records.
And how did they stack up against the other medical AI models that are out there?
They blew them out of the water. Existing models, even those that were specifically fine-tuned for medical tasks, they really struggled with those more complex temporal questions posed by TimerBench. So it became very clear that simply having access to a lot of medical text wasn't enough. They needed that specialized training provided by Timer-Instruct to truly grasp the intricacies of a patient's medical history.
It's amazing to see how this targeted approach to training is yielding such significant results. It seems like Timer-Instruct is really helping those LLMs navigate the complexities of a medical timeline.
Absolutely. And to really appreciate the impact, I think it's helpful to look at some concrete examples. Imagine you're a doctor and you want to understand a patient's weight trends over the past year so you can see if maybe their medication dosage needs to be adjusted. A traditional model might just pull in irrelevant data from years ago, and it makes it difficult to get a clear picture.
It'd be like looking at a map of their entire life's journey when you really just need directions for the last mile.
Right, but a model trained with Timer-Instruct, it stays focused on that specific time frame you've requested. So it can provide a much more relevant and insightful analysis of those recent weight trends.
It's like giving the AI a temporal GPS, helping it to pinpoint the exact information you need within this vast sea of data.
Another compelling example is using AI to track a patient's hearing loss over time. Traditional models might just make these incorrect assumptions about improvement, even if the medical record doesn't actually support it. But a Timer-Instruct model would carefully analyze that actual trend and provide a more accurate assessment based on the available evidence.
So it's not just about finding the information. It's about critically evaluating that information within its temporal context. That's a crucial skill for any doctor, whether human or AI.
Absolutely, and perhaps one of the most impressive applications is using Timer to generate a coherent timeline of events leading up to a specific medical visit. Think about how challenging that can be for a human doctor. You have to sift through years of records to piece together that story.
It's like trying to assemble a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing and others don't quite fit.
A traditional AI, it might just get bogged down by all these irrelevant visits and create this jumbled, confusing mess. But a model trained with Timer-Instruct it filters out all that noise and it focuses on the key events just like a skilled physician would.
These examples really highlight, I think, the practical value of timer. It's not just about some theoretical improvement in AI's understanding of time.
Yeah.
It's about making these AI tools more useful, more reliable, and ultimately more beneficial for both doctors and patients.
I couldn't agree more. I think Timer is really paving the way for a future where AI can assist healthcare professionals in these truly meaningful ways, offering insights and analysis that might otherwise be missed.
Now, all this talk about AI understanding time in this medical context, it makes me wonder about the broader implications. Could this lead to breakthroughs in other fields that rely heavily on temporal data? I'm thinking like climate modeling, financial forecasting, maybe even our understanding of human behavior.
It's an excellent question, and one that we'll definitely delve into further in our Novel Notions segment, where we explore the potential extensions of this groundbreaking research. But before we embark on that thought experiment, let's take a moment to highlight, I think, the key takeaway for our listeners today. What's the big so what of Timer?
I mean, to me, it's about pushing the boundaries of what AI can do. It's
Right.
about moving beyond simple information processing and actually teaching these machines to understand the flow of events, the chronology of a story. That's such a fundamental human skill, and it's incredibly exciting to see glimmers of that capability emerging in AI.
I completely agree. And by focusing on this temporal dimension, especially in a field as critical as healthcare, we're not just building smarter AI. We're building AI that can be more helpful, more insightful, and ultimately more trustworthy.
Beautifully put. Now, are you ready to take a leap into the future with some novel notions?
Lead the way. I'm eager to see where your imagination takes us.
All right, buckle up, everyone. Here's where things get really interesting. All right, before we get too carried away with all these future possibilities, I think it's helpful to ground ourselves a little bit in the technical details of timer. After all, these impressive results didn't just like magically materialize out of thin air. There's some serious engineering going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Understanding the nuts and bolts, I think, can really deepen our appreciation for the ingenuity of this research. So let's unpack the architecture of Timer, starting with TimerBench, their evaluation framework.
Right. TimerBench is like the proving ground where they put these LLMs through their paces. They give them a series of tests to see how well they can handle temporal reasoning in a medical context.
Precisely. And the data they used to create this benchmark is astonishing. They tapped into this massive repository of electronic health records, millions of patients, decades worth of medical data.
Wow, that's a huge amount of information. Did they manually analyze all those records to create their benchmark? That would take forever.
That's where their clever use of LLMs comes in again. Remember how they use AI to generate that training data for Timer-Instruct?
Oh, right.
They applied a very similar approach here.
Oh, right. So they're using AI to build the test for other AIs. That's pretty meta.
Exactly. They essentially gave an LLM a set of patient records and instructed it to create this series of questions that specifically focused on temporal relationships. So this allowed them to generate this vast and diverse benchmark without needing a whole team of medical experts to manually craft each question.
It's incredibly efficient, and it ensures that the benchmark is comprehensive. It truly tests the limits of these AI models. So what kinds of questions are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
Sure. So some questions might require the LLM to summarize a patient's disease progression over a specific period. Others might ask it to compare lab results from different visits or pinpoint the key events that led up to a particular diagnosis.
It sounds like they're really putting these LLMs through the ringer, challenging them to analyze information across time and extract these meaningful insights.
Precisely. And what's crucial is that TimerBench includes these explicit time evidence annotations. So this means that each question is linked to specific dates and events in that patient record.
So they're not just asking the AI to answer the question, they're providing it with a temporal map, making sure that it's actually accurately navigating the timeline of the the patient's history.
Brilliant analogy. Now let's shift our focus a bit to Timer-Instruct, the actual training method that empowers these LLMs to reason about time more effectively.
This is where the AI really learns to grasp that concept of temporality, right?
Exactly. And the key here is the type of data that they feed these models. So they use those same instruction response pairs that they generated for the benchmark, but this time they use them as teaching tools. They demonstrate how events connect across time and how to draw meaningful conclusions from a patient's medical journey.
It's like showing the AI model the answer key, but not just giving it the answer. It has to actually learn that reasoning process, the logic behind connecting those events over time.
That's a great way to put it. And remember the lost in the middle effect that we discussed earlier. Well, they addressed that during training by experimenting with different ways of presenting that data. Some data sets emphasized those recent events. Others focused on the edges of the timeline, and one had a more uniform distribution covering events from all parts of the patient's history.
So they were testing different learning styles, seeing which one was most effective in teaching the AI to reason about time.
Exactly. And what they found was fascinating. The models trained with that uniformly distributed data, the one covering that whole timeline, they perform significantly better on those temporal reasoning tasks.
It's like saying that for a student to truly master a subject, they need a balanced curriculum, not just a crash course in the most recent development.
Precisely. Now, the training process itself involves some sophisticated techniques, but the fundamental idea is to optimize how these LLMs learn from temporal data.
So they're not just throwing information at the AI. They're carefully structuring that information to emphasize the importance of time and sequence.
Exactly. And the results speak for themselves. These timer-trained models consistently outperformed existing medical AI models, both on their own benchmark and on established benchmarks like Medline.
It really goes to show that specialized training, focusing on those specific challenges of temporal reasoning, it makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Timer. A truly remarkable paper pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI in healthcare.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the intricacies of temporal reasoning, the ingenuity of their approach, and the potential, I think, for AI to truly revolutionize how we understand and interact with medical data.
We've seen how Timer addresses this critical limitation of current AI models, their struggle with this concept of time, and how their innovative techniques are paving the way for more insightful and trustworthy medical AI applications.
We even took a glimpse into the future, imagining how Timer could be applied beyond healthcare, potentially influencing fields like climate modeling, financial forecasting, maybe even our understanding of human behavior.
As always, we encourage our listeners to dive deeper into the paper itself. You can find a link in the show notes. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on Timer, your own novel notions, or any other papers you'd like us to explore on TalkTensors.
Until next time, keep those neural networks firing. And remember, in the world of AI, time is of the essence.